It's incredible, I think, if you start analyzing how much of church life and how much of life in general is driven by fear. Oftentimes people would deny that it is fear, but it's fear. And you see it equally, except expressed differently in both liberal and conservative circles. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the expression by Jim Wallace, the Sojourners founder, who always says, he said, this is the trouble both in the churches, in our churches, and in society. He says, the conservatives get it and invariably get it wrong, and the liberals invariably don't get it at all. And that's true, I think, with fear. So that, and we'll talk about this today, how conservatives are concerned that we're not preaching enough fear in religion. Liberals are concerned that all fear is unhealthy, and both of those aren't very good positions. What I want to do is talk today about three sessions. I want to talk, first of all, I'll introduce this in a few minutes, just to try to define fear. That fear, when you start looking at it, is an extremely, extremely complex reality. It's a cauldron of all kinds of things, and some of our fears you're going to see are very healthy. They're deeply instinctually rooted. They're there to protect us. Some of our religious fears are healthy, and some of our fears are very unhealthy and are the very antithesis of everything we believe in as Christians. But they all are rooted in the same they come out of the same kettle. So it's going to be very important to sort out the origins of fear, where fear comes from, what it's rooted in, and that's what we'll do with our first session. Then I want to look at with you about the difference between healthy and unhealthy religious fear. And then finally, and probably most importantly, to look at principles that invite us to have less fear of God. We're always too afraid of our Maker, of our origins. So let's begin with this. And I want to begin with two kind of things I just want to drop out here for you, which in some sense contradict each other, but are to set the table for this and its complexity. The first one's this, and very, very importantly, that in Scripture, if you read the Bible from cover to cover, you will see that in Scripture, virtually every time that God appears, theologians call that a theophany, so that God appears. God appears in the form of fire, the burning bush to Moses. God appears oftentimes as an angel appearing to somebody, or God appears in Jesus, or Jesus appears after the resurrection. But in virtually every one of them, more than 300 of those we can count in Scripture, when God appears in human life, the first words are always this: do not be afraid. So that's very important, and we'll come back on that many times today. When God appears in your life, the very first words you're going to hear are the antithesis of fear. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. So that one of the marks of what's truly from God is something that soothes our fears as opposed to provokes our fears. So that's very, very important, that religion, as I'm going to say a number of times today, particularly Christianity, is the antithesis of fear. As Jesus says, I've come to set you free from all fears. And fear is the opposite of love. So I want you to keep that in mind. That's the one part of the prong. The second part of the tension, begin with a story. If you've ever seen the movie by Robert Redford called A River Runs Through It. It's based on a very famous book and so on. But this is the opening dialogue of the movie. As the credits take shape at the beginning, you hear the voice speaking this way. And the man says, I want to tell you the story about my brother. He said, my brother was a beautiful guy. He said, he's just this wonderful man. He was born, he said, he was never afraid of anything in his whole life. Of course, he died young. Okay. You're going to see it's the opposite. Fear, you're going to see, is a great protection. Those who have no fears might be very beautiful people. They all die young. See, very beautiful man, never afraid of anything in his life. Of course, he died young. You're going to see it's very important that fear, as we're going to see, is also a gift. It's going to be the greatest neurosis in our lives, and it's also going to be the greatest gift in our lives. with that being said, let's move into the first part. I want to spend some time with you simply trying to define fear. And then we'll try to look at how religious fear comes out of that cauldron of just all this mixture of things. Now, sometimes, I often don't look at dictionaries and probably should look at dictionaries more, but sometimes it's very helpful just to look at dictionary definitions. And so I looked at different dictionary definitions, and they emphasized 4 different aspects of fear. We're going to go into phenomenology of this, but first just the dictionary definition. So if you look at a normal dictionary, it's just something like this. Fear is a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, or pain, whether the threat is real or imagined. Or they'll say it's the feeling or condition of being afraid, and its symptoms are foreboding, apprehension, consternation, dismay, dread, terror, fright, panic, horror, and so on. Secondly, and now you're going to see that's a neutral definition. Fear just, that's what you feel. Then the next 2 definitions are going to speak of fear as something healthy. So they say fear is a concern or an anxiety or a solicitude. Solicitude is a good word. That means that's when you're healthily concerned about something. You're going to see a lot of fear is really healthy. You know, fear is a great gift in our lives. Or thirdly, they talk about fear as a reverential fear, especially towards God, the fear of God, and the symptoms there are awe, respect, reverence, and veneration. We'll look at that during the second part of these talks. So that, as Scripture says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So there is a fear that's very healthy, this fear that lies deep in the innards of our religion. You're going to see also a lot of fear is absolutely antithetical to religion. So that fear, there is a fear that's reverential. The healthy fear of God, there's a fear that's very unhealthy. And lastly, I looked up Carl Rogers, because when I was a young student, we all had to study Carl Rogers. And I'm still a great admirer of his. And Rogers says, fear is the passion of our nature which excites us to provide for our security on the approach of evil. Notice that's a positive definition. He's defining fear instinctually. See, fear is an instinct. And the instincts are there by nature to protect you